Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we aren't just looking at a chapter in a history book. We are looking at the moment India decided that the head wasn't enough and it needed to listen to the heart.
Wow.
We are stepping into a time machine to witness a massive cultural shift, a movement that redefined how people connected with the divine, how society looked at caste, and let's be honest, how you are going to score some serious marks in your exams.
That's the key.
We are covering the Bhakti movement in medieval India.
It is, it's a fascinating era. Think of it as the great democratization of the divine. It's the moment religion moved from the closed-door, Sanskrit-speaking elite circles right into the dusty streets, sung in the languages of the common people.
Exactly.
And for our listeners preparing for the UPSC, this is Chapter 18 of the Tamil Nadu Board Class History Book. It is an absolute goldmine for both prelims and mains. I mean, really, you can't ignore this chapter.
That is the mission today. We are going to unpack the facts, the philosophy, the chronology, which is tricky, and those crucial exam-worthy connections. But before we dive into the mysticism, a quick message for our Simplified UPSC by PPP family.
Right.
If you are finding value in these deep dives and they are helping you connect the dots for your prep, please hit that subscribe button. It really supports our mission to bring you this super useful content.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference. And for those of you who are capable and, want to ensure we can keep this series running long term, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Producing these deep dives takes a lot of research and resources, and every bit of support helps us keep the lights on.
A huge shout out to all our current supporters. You guys are the real MVPs making this content creation possible for real. Also, don't forget to like this video and share your valuable comments. It boosts the algorithm and helps other learners find us.
And we do read the comments.
We do. We love seeing the discussion there.
One more resource alert before we start. I have uploaded free notes with practice previous year questions, PYQs, on our public Telegram channel. These are designed to go hand in hand with this audio.
Which is super helpful.
But for those who want the full arsenal, we have a private Telegram library.
That's right. That gives you access to all videos in this series at once, plus organized premium notes. And we're talking detailed summaries, extra PYQs, and even model mains answers.
So if you want in on that, just DM us on the public Telegram channel to join. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, housekeeping done.
All right, let's get to the mission. Chapter 18, Bhakti Movement in Medieval India.
Let's set the scene. We aren't just talking about people suddenly deciding to sing hymns. History doesn't happen in a vacuum. A movement this large, it usually happens because the status quo isn't working.
Exactly.
But didn't we have a Bhakti movement earlier? I feel like I remember reading about it with the Pallavas and Pandyas.
We did, and it's really important to distinguish the two. That was the early wave, around the 7th and 8th centuries in Tamil Nadu, the Nayanmars, who worship Shiva, and the Alwars, who worship Vishnu.
Okay.
That was largely a reaction against the spread of Buddhism and Jainism in the South. It was a kind of internal religious competition. But what we're discussing today is the medieval wave. It's a different beast entirely. The context had changed completely.
Changed how? What was the pressure point? What was different this time?
The catalyst, and this is the big one, was the arrival and establishment of Islamic rule in India. You see, the earlier movement was largely internal to the Indic fold. The medieval movement was, in many ways, a response to the new social and religious reality brought by Islam.
Okay, so it's an external factor now.
It is. You have to imagine the psychological state of the society. You had a rigid caste system, the Varna system, which had become incredibly stratified. Access to the divine was gatekept by the Brahmins.
Right, through rituals and Sanskrit.
Exactly. Scriptures were in Sanskrit, which the common peasant or artisan couldn't understand. So you have a scenario where the average person is socially marginalized and spiritually distanced. They're told God is there, but they can't really reach him without a middleman.
And then Islam arrives on the scene.
And Islam brings with it specific principles that were radically different from the orthodox Hindu practice at the time. We are talking about monotheism, belief in one God, which was simple and direct.
No pantheon, just one.
Just one. And then equality, brotherhood, and a flat-out rejection of complex rituals and class divisions.
It sounds like it held up a mirror to the existing society. If you have a rigid caste system on one side and a new faith-preaching brotherhood on the other, that's going to spark some introspection among the Hindu leadership.
It absolutely forced a reformatting, if you will. The Hindu reformers realized that to keep the flock together, they needed to simplify. They needed to offer a path to salvation that didn't require expensive rituals or, crucially, high birth.
But it wasn't just a reaction, right? There was an exchange of ideas.
Yes, and we can't just look at this as a reaction. That's too simplistic. We had to look at the parallel stream that was bringing these ideas of love and equality into the subcontinent. We have to talk about Sufism.
Okay, let's unpack Sufism. I think a lot of candidates get confused here. They know it's mystical Islam, but what does that actually mean technically? What's the core of it?
Think of Sufism as the inner dimension of Islam. It's a liberal reform movement that originated in Persia and entered India around the 11th century. While Orthodox Islam focused on the Sharia, the law, the external conduct Sufism focused on the tariqah,
The path.
the journey inward. And the core idea is very, very similar to Bhakti. Love and devotion are the only means of salvation.
So not just following the rule book, but actually having an emotional, loving connection to the divine.
Right. For Sufis, service to humanity was tantamount to service to God. This is a key phrase to remember for Maine's answers. Service to humanity is service to God. They prioritized inner purity over external conduct.
Okay, so it's about what's in your heart, not just what you do.
Precisely. And crucially, they believed in the necessity of a peer or a guru. You need a guide to navigate the spiritual path, someone who has walked it before.
It's interesting how similar that is to the Hindu guru Shishya tradition. It seems like these two rivers, Bhakti and Sufism, were flowing in the same direction, using different words.
They were, and they started to merge in places.
So who are the big names here, the who's who of Indian Sufism?
Well, the first Sufi saint to start preaching in India was Sheikh Ismail of Lahore. But if we were talking about impact, about real lasting influence, the absolute superstar of the movement was Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti.
The Ajmer Sharif Dargah, right, that's his resting place. Millions go there.
Yes, that's him. He arrived in India around the late 12th century and settled in Ajmer. He founded the Chishti order in India. Now, the Chishtis were fascinating. They believed in keeping a distance from the state.
They didn't take royal patronage?
Nope. They lived in poverty, often in small communes called khankas. Muinuddin Chishti was incredibly popular because of his simple life and his genuine dedication to the poor. He was known as Garib Nawaz.
The benefactor of the poor.
Yes. And that creates a stark contrast to the royal courts and even the more orthodox religious establishments.
Who else should we know?
Then you have Bahadur Zakaria, who founded the Suhrawardi order. Now, unlike the Chishtis, the Suhrawardis were the opposite. They accepted royal patronage, held state positions, and lived quite comfortably.
So two different models of engaging with power.
Two very different models. They believed you could serve God while being part of the establishment. And we cannot forget Nizamuddin Aulia, another giant of the Chishti order in Delhi.
Nizamuddin Aulia, he's the one who had the famous rift with the Sultan Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, right? Delhi is yet far away.
Hun is a Dili Durast. Exactly. He was a mighty spiritual force. He believed in Sama musical gatherings to induce spiritual ecstasy. This was controversial among the Orthodox, who saw music as, well, un-Islamic.
But it made the movement incredibly accessible, I'd imagine.
Hugely accessible. It's much easier to join a song than to read a theological text.
And the social impact. Why should a student care about these Sufis beyond just memorizing names?
Because they were the bridge. Their tombs, or dargahs, became, and still are, pilgrimage sites for both Hindus and Muslims. They fostered a spirit of tolerance. They spoke the local dialects. This Sufi vibe, if you will, it shaped the thinking of the Bhakti reformers we're about to discuss. It created an atmosphere where boundaries were porous.
Okay, so the stage is set. You have this atmosphere of devotion, of reform, a kind of spiritual churn. Now let's talk about the philosophical giants who provided the intellectual backbone for Hinduism during this time. We usually talk about the big three, Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhava.
Yes.
But these aren't just names. They represent three very different ways of viewing reality.
Correct. And we have to start with Adi Shankaracharya, or Sankara, even though he's a bit earlier. We're talking 9th century. He was born in Kaladi, Kerala. Sankara is the Mount Everest of Indian philosophy.
The proponent of Advaita, right?
Yes, Advaita Vedanta. Advaita means non-dualism. He preached the concept of Nirguna Brahman, God without attributes. Sankara argued that the world we see around us is Maya, an illusion.
An illusion.
A cosmic illusion. The only reality is Brahman, the universal consciousness. And here's the kicker. The soul, Atman, and God, Brahman, are identical. They are one and the same.
Like the classic analogy, the space inside a jar is the same as the space outside the jar. Break the jar, and the space is one.
That is a classic analogy, yes. But here's the thing about intellectual geniuses. Sometimes they were hard for the common person to understand. Sankara's philosophy requires high intellect. It's a path of jhana, or knowledge. It was a head religion.
And that's not very comforting for everyone.
Not at all. If you are a peasant toiling in the fields, telling you that your suffering is an illusion isn't very helpful. It lacks the emotional hook.
Right. It's too abstract.
Exactly. This created a vacuum. People needed an emotional connection. They needed a God they could talk to, cry to, and, love. And that is where Ramanuja enters the picture in the 12th century.
Born in Suhrawardi near Chennai.
Yes. And Ramanuja preached Vishishtadvaita. This translates to qualified non-dualism. It's a nuanced but absolutely critical shift.
Qualified non-dualism. Unpack that for us.
Okay, so he believed in Saguna Brahman God with attributes. He argued that the world and creation are real, not an illusion like Sankara said. They are real, and they are glorious creations of God.
So how did he explain the relationship between God and the soul if they're not identical?
He used the analogy of the body and the soul. The universe, all of us, we are the body of God. Just as the soul controls the body, God controls the universe. They're one in a sense, but they're also distinct in function. God is the inner substance. Everything else is an attribute.
Okay, that's a bit easier to grasp. But you said the biggest shift wasn't metaphysical.
No, it was practical. It was about the path to salvation. He advocated prapatti or bhakti, the path of self-surrender. It wasn't about understanding complex texts. It was about surrendering to God, specifically Vishnu.
So devotion over knowledge.
Devotion over knowledge. He opened the doors of the temples to the lower castes on specific days. He was trying to make the divine accessible to everyone.
This actually brings us to our first major PYQ linkage. This is where it gets real for the exam.
It does. In the 2022 prelims, there was a question specifically about Ramanuja. The question asked about his core teaching. The answer key focused on the idea that the best means of salvation was devotion.
Which directly contrasts with Sankara's focus on knowledge, or jnana.
Exactly. If you understand that fundamental difference, Sankara is knowledge and intellect, Ramanuja is devotion and surrender, that question becomes a giveaway. It's not about memorizing the date, it's about understanding the vibe of the philosophy.
The vibe, I like that. So who is the third giant, Madhava?
Madhava comes in the 13th century, from the Kannada region. He propagated Dvaita, or dualism. He went a step further away from Sankara. He said the Jivatma, the individual soul, and Paramatma, God, are totally separate.
So not one, not qualified one, but two, dualism.
Exactly. He believed that even after salvation, the soul remains distinct from God, enjoying bliss but remaining a separate entity. The world is a reality, and the path is to serve God.
So you see this progression, it's fascinating. Sankara says, we are all one, the world is fake. Ramanuja says, we are part of God, the world is real. Madhava says, we are different from God, and we must serve him.
Precisely. This philosophical groundwork was essential because it gave a theological justification for bhakti. It proved you didn't need to be a Sanskrit scholar to reach God. You just needed to love him. And that idea was about to explode.
Right, because that sets the philosophical groundwork in the South. But the movement really took off. It exploded when it moved north and underwent a major transformation.
A huge transformation.
It became less about these high-level Sanskrit debates and more about the language of the street.
That transition is absolutely key. You cannot have a mass movement in a language that only the elite speak. The shift to vernacular languages, Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, Braj Bhasha, was the fuel for the bhakti fire. It's like when the Bible was finally translated from Latin into German and English, suddenly everyone had access.
And the man bridging the South and North, the key figure here, was Ramananda.
Ramananda is a pivotal figure. He lived around the 14th, 15th century. He was originally a follower of Ramanuja, but he found the caste rules in the South too rigid for his liking. So he moved to Benares and Agra and founded his own sect.
What made him so different? What were his innovations?
First, he worshipped Rama, which is significant. But his biggest innovation was social. He preached in Hindi. That was radical. High philosophy in the market language. Unheard of.
Wow.
And second, he completely disregarded the caste system when it came to his disciples. He threw the doors wide open.
I love looking at his list of disciples. It's like the dream team of social inclusion. It reads like a deliberate statement against the hierarchy.
It really does. I mean, just look at the roster. You had Kabir, a Muslim weaver.
A Muslim.
Yes. Then Raidasa,
Yeah.
a cobbler, a profession considered untouchable because it dealt with dead skin. Sena, a barber. Sadhana, a butcher. Dana, a jat farmer. Narahari, a goldsmith. And Pipa, a Rajput prince.
A prince, a butcher, and a cobbler, all sitting together as equals. That is a powerful, powerful visual for medieval India. It just shatters the concept of pollution and purity that the caste system relied on.
It was a direct challenge. Ramananda's message was crystal clear. God doesn't care about your resume or your caste. He cares about your devotion. There was a famous saying attributed to him, Jat pat puchinakoi hariko bajaso harikawe.
Let no one ask a man's caste or sect. Whoever worships God belongs to God.
That's the one. It sums up the entire social revolution he started.
While Ramananda was doing this in Benares, there were other powerhouses in the north and west, right? It wasn't just him.
Not at all. The movement was spreading. In the Telangana region, you had Nimbarka and Vallabhacharya. Vallabhacharya founded the Pushtimarg, or the Path of Grace. His philosophy was Dvaita, pure non-dualism.
And his most famous disciple was Surdas.
Yes, Surdas, the blind poet. Surdas is the one who really popularized the Krishna cult in North India. His Surtsagar is this incredible collection of verses dedicated to Krishna's childhood.
So he humanized the divine?
Totally. Krishna wasn't just a cosmic force giving a lecture on a battlefield. He was a mischievous child, a butter thief, a loving son. It made God relatable.
And of course, you can't talk about Krishna Bhakti without mentioning Meerabai in Rajasthan.
Meerabai is a fascinating study in defiance. A true rebel. She was a Rajput princess married into the royal family of Mewar. By all social norms, she should have lived a life of seclusion behind the purdah.
But she didn't.
Not even a little bit. She renounced royal life to wander and sing for her beloved Krishna. Her bhajans are still famous today. But think about the courage that took. In a feudal, patriarchal society, for a queen to dance in the streets with commoners, it was revolutionary.
She refused to commit sati. She refused to conform. She represents a kind of a feminist aspect of the Bhakti movement.
Yeah.
She asserted her right to salvation on her own terms.
100%. And then, shifting focus slightly, we have Tulsidas.
Right.
Tulsidas comes a bit later. In the 16th century, he's a contemporary of Akbar. He was a worshiper of Rama, and he wrote the Ramcharitmanas.
The Hindi version of the Ramayana. Why is that specific book so important?
Because before Tulsidas, if you want to know the story of Rama, you needed Valmiki's Ramayana, which was in Sanskrit. Tulsidas brought the epic to the doorstep of the peasant. It unified the Hindu society of North India by giving them a common scripture they could understand and love. It was a cultural touchstone.
So the movement is spreading. It's in the local languages. It's challenging caste. Now let's talk about the icons of syncretism, the figures who really tried to blend Hindu and Muslim philosophies. I'm talking about Kabir and Guru Nanak.
Right, and Kabir is perhaps the most famous disciple of Ramananda. His background itself is a blend. Legend has it he was born to a Brahmin widow, but raised by a Muslim weaver in Varanasi.
So he lived that syncretism from birth.
He did. And he had an incredibly inquiring mind. He didn't accept things just because a priest or a mullah said so. He questioned everything.
I always picture Kabir as that guy who asks the uncomfortable questions, the satirist who cuts through the hypocrisy.
He was. He refused to accept the surface-level differences. His famous analogy was that Hindus and Muslims are just pots of the same clay. Rama and Allah, he said, are the same force, just different names. He wrote in dohas couplets that were biting and sarcastic and brilliant.
He didn't hold back on critiquing rituals either, did he?
Not at all. He ridiculed the Brahmin for his sacred thread and the Muslim for his circumcision. He asked, if God wanted you circumcised, why weren't you born that way? He denounced idolatry. He denounced empty rituals like bathing in the Ganges. He said what matters is a pure heart, honesty, and kindness. He wanted Sahaja Yoga, a simple, natural union with God.
Now, here is where we need to be careful with our timeline, especially for the exam. Students often conflate these figures, and UPSC loves to trap them there.
Yes, let's look at the 2019 prelims. There was a statement that said, Singh Kabir was greatly influenced by Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi.
Okay, that sounds plausible if you don't know the dates. They are both sort of Islamic influence figures.
But it is historically impossible. Kabir lived in the 15th century, roughly 1440 to 1518. Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi was a 17th century figure, born in 1564. He's a contemporary of Akbar and Jahangir.
So he came much, much later.
Much later. And Sirhindi was actually quite orthodox from the Naqshbandi order, a reaction against Akbar's syncretism. So they were philosophically opposed and separated by over a century. Knowing your basic chronology allows you to eliminate that option immediately.
Timelines matter, folks. You don't need exact birthdays, but you need to know the century. Speaking of timelines, let's talk about Guru Nanak.
Born in 1469 in Talwandi near Lahore, he is, of course, the founder of Sikhism. Tradition says he was influenced by Kabir, but he carved out a very unique path. His philosophy was highly practical and sternly ethical.
Abide pure amidst the impurities of the world. I love that line.
That was his motto. He didn't ask people to run away to the forests and become ascetics. He said, live as a householder, earn an honest living, but keep your mind on God.
And no caste.
No caste distinctions, totally rejected. He introduced the concept of langar, the community kitchen.
Which is such a profound social engineering tool. If everyone sits in a line, the king next to the pauper, and eats the same food prepared by volunteers, caste just dissolves in that moment.
It's social equality in practice, not just in theory. He rejected rituals like bathing in holy rivers, saying that external washing doesn't clean the internal spirit.
There's that famous story of him at the Ganges.
Yes, he saw pilgrims throwing water to the east for their ancestors, and he started throwing water to the west. When they asked what he was doing, he said he was watering his fields in Punjab. They laughed and said, how can your water reach that far?
And he said,
if your water can reach your ancestors in heaven, surely mine can reach my fields a few hundred miles away.
That logic. It just cuts right through the superstition. Now, there is a very specific timeline question related to Guru Nanak from the 2013 prelims.
A classic one. The question asked, who was preaching when the Lodi dynasty fell and Babur took over?
That refers to the First Battle of Panipat, 1526, a massive turning point in Indian history.
Correct. And Guru Nanak lived from 1469 to 1539, so he witnessed that entire transition from the Delhi Sultanate of the Lotus to the brand new Mughal Empire under Babur. He was right there preaching during that political upheaval. In fact, according to Sikh tradition, he was even imprisoned by Babur briefly.
It really grounds these figures when you realize they weren't just living in caves, they were living through major political shifts, wars, and the birth of empires.
Their teachings were a response to the world they lived in.
Let's move to the regional powerhouses. We've touched on the north, but Bengal and Maharashtra were also massive centers for bhakti. And the flavor there was slightly different.
Yes. In Bengal, the central figure is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who lived from 1486 to 1534. He popularized the Krishna cult there. But his method was unique. He used Sankirtan.
Song and dance.
Ecstatic song and dance. He believed that through singing and dancing publicly in a group, you could feel God's presence physically and emotionally. It was very infectious. You didn't need to know scripture. You just needed to join the chorus and let go.
And what was his social message?
He preached universal brotherhood. He condemned caste distinctions. He had Muslim disciples. He emphasized that the name of God is more powerful than the caste of the devotee. This laid the foundation for the Vaishnavite culture in Bengal, which is still very strong today.
And in Maharashtra, this is often called the Maharashtra Dharma. It feels more, I don't know, more gritty, more grassroots.
It was very grassroots. It's centered around the Vithoba temple at Pantapur. The movement started with Nanadeva, or Jnaneshwar, in the 13th century. He was an absolute prodigy. He wrote the Nanaswari at a very young age.
That's the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita in Marathi.
Yes, and that's huge. Before this, the Gita was locked in Sanskrit. Nanadeva liberated it. He brought the highest philosophy to the common Marathi-speaking person. After him came Namadeva.
Namadeva represents that cross-regional connection again, doesn't he?
He does. He was a tailor by caste. He preached the gospel of love, opposed priestly domination, and was strictly against caste. And interestingly, some of his verses are included in the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book of the Sikhs. This shows how these saints traveled and how their ideas cross-pollinated across regions.
Fascinating. And then later in the 16th century, you have Ekanatha.
Ekanatha was a scholar who was very sympathetic to the lower castes. He composed many folk lyrics called baruds, which were simple and musical. He tried to bridge the gap between high philosophy and folk tradition.
And perhaps the most politically significant figure, Tukaram.
Yes. Tukaram from the 17th century. He was a contemporary of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and this is really important. Tukaram's teachings created the cultural background for Maratha nationalism.
How so? What's the connection?
By opposing social distinctions, by singing in Marathi, by creating this shared religious identity around the god Vithoba, he helped unify the Maratha people. He created a sense of shared identity that wasn't based on being a Brahmin or a Maratha or a Kunbi, but on being a devotee. This gave Shivaji a socially cohesive base to build his kingdom upon.
And Ramdas was another spiritual leader there, fostering that unity.
Yes, Ramdas was Shivaji's spiritual guru. He wrote a text called Dasbodh. He combined spiritualism with a kind of activism. He encouraged physical strength and political awareness. It's a great example of how spiritual movements can lay the groundwork for political ones. You cannot separate culture from politics in history.
That is such a key point. So we have covered the map, we've covered the timeline, we've met the saints. Now let's unpack the so what. Why does this movement matter in the grand scheme of Indian history? If I'm writing a mains answer about the significance of the Bhakti movement, what are my bullet points?
The legacy is profound. First, and maybe most obviously, think about language. The Bhakti movement was a linguistic renaissance. Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, Kannada, Punjabi, these languages flourished because the saints chose to speak and write in them. They gave these languages literary status. Before this, serious literature meant Sanskrit. Bhakti democratized literature.
It was like the open sourcing of religion and culture. A great analogy. Okay, so language is number one.
That is a great analogy. Secondly, social reform. For the first time, the lower classes were raised to a position of spiritual importance. The caste system was condemned by religious authorities, not just political rebels. It gave dignity to the lower castes. Now, it didn't end caste, let's be realistic, but it softened its rigor and provided an escape valve.
And what about women's status? We talked about Meerabai.
Absolutely. Figures like Meerabai, Andal in the south, and Laleshwari in Kashmir, they show that women could be spiritual leaders in their own right. It challenged the patriarchal notion that women couldn't achieve salvation directly, that they needed a husband or son.
Okay, so language, social reform, women's status. What else?
Religious simplification. It moved religion away from expensive, complicated rituals that required a priest towards sincere devotion, charity, and service. It made religion personal. It emphasized that a pure heart is more important than a pure pedigree.
It really was a democratization of the divine. You keep coming back to that word.
Because that's what it was. And finally, syncretism. It created a shared cultural space between Hindus and Muslims. Elements like Sufi music, the celebration of festivals, the shared reverence for saints. This created the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, the composite culture of India that we talk so much about.
All right, now we are going to pivot to our exam corner. We have mentioned a few PYQs, but let's dive deeper into the sources and see how to use this knowledge. We need to be surgical here, really break down how UPSC asks these questions.
Let's look at a few specifics.
Start with that tricky one about Nimbarka we glossed over earlier, the one about Akbar.
Right. 2019 prelims, question 13, one of the statements was, Saint Nimbarka was a contemporary of Akbar.
Now we know Akbar is 16th century. He reigned from 1556 to 1605.
And we just discussed that Nimbarka was a contemporary of Ramanuja, roughly 12th century. They're separated by 400 years. It's not even close. So again, understanding the chronological flow, Shankara 9th, then Ramanuja and Nimbarka 11th, 12th, then the later Bhakti saints like Kabir Nanak 15th and Tulsidas 16th helps you eliminate wrong answers instantly.
You don't need the exact year, just the era. That's a huge tip. What about the connection to the Mughals? There was that translation question.
Yes, 2022 question Q94. It asked about the Yoga Vasista being translated into Persian. It asked during whose reign? The answer is Akbar. But the context is important here. This translation movement was part of the same syncretic atmosphere that the Bhakti and Sufi movements created.
Ah, I see.
Akbar didn't just wake up and decide to translate books. He was influenced by this cultural milieu where engaging with the other religion was seen as virtuous. It was in the air.
It all connects. The Bhakti movement softens the ground, Sufism provides a bridge, and then you see political leaders like Akbar adopting policies of tolerance like Suli Kul.
Exactly. And for mains, this is your fodder. If you get a question on Indian culture or social reforms, you don't just list names of saints. You explain the impact. You connect the dots.
Give us a model sentence. If you were writing a conclusion for a mains answer on this, what would you say?
You could write something like, the Bhakti movement was not merely a religious revival, but a profound social revolution that democratized spiritual access through the use of vernacular languages and directly challenged the rigidity of the caste system, paving the way for a syncretic Indian culture that transcended sectarian divides.
Ooh, that is good. Democratized spiritual access. That's a keyword phrase. Write that down, guys.
Also quote the principles. Use phrases like, service to humanity was tantamount to service to God. That's a direct lift from Sufi principles, but it applies to the whole era. Mention how the rise of vernacular literature acted as a tool for social unification.
And don't forget the regional examples. If you're writing about regionalism or nationalism, bring in Tukaram and the Marathas. It shows you understand the political fallout of these cultural movements.
Yes. The syllabus asks about Bhakti movement, but the questions often ask about its impact or significance. You have to connect the dots.
Okay, we are coming to the end of our deep dive. We have gone from the intellectual heights of Sankara to the emotional waves of Chaitanya, from the weavers of Benares to the battlefields of Panipat.
It is a story of how India redefined itself. It moved from a rigid, ritualistic society to one that, at least in its ideals, valued devotion and humanity above birth and caste. It's the story of the rise of the individual's relationship with the divine.
Here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you study. The Bhakti movement and Sufism were all about removing barriers, blurring the lines between Hindu and Muslim, high caste and low caste. Pots of the same clay, as Kabir said.
But there's always a but.
But eventually, distinct sectarian identities hardened again. We see communal conflicts later in history. We see caste rigidifying again in the colonial era. So the question is, if these movements were so powerful and so widespread, why didn't that syncretism last permanently? Why did the barriers go back up?
That's a heavy question.
Was the movement too dependent on charismatic leaders? Or is human nature just prone to tribalism?
Or was it political manipulation by later rulers like Aurangzeb? Was it inherent in the religious structures themselves, which reasserted their control? That is something to mull over. It might even be a great angle for an essay topic on the durability of social reform in India.
Indeed. Something to think about as you prep.
And before we sign off, a quick reminder. The notes for this episode, including the timeline we discussed and the specific PYQ breakdown, are on the public Telegram channel. It's free.
And if you want the premium experience, the organized library, the model answers, the extra drill questions, DM us on the public Telegram channel to join the private library. It's the best way to streamline your prep.
And please, if you found this valuable, subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube. It helps us immensely.
And consider supporting on Patreon if you can. We want to keep these deep dives coming. Thank you to all our supporters. You guys rock.
Keep learning, keep questioning.
And we will catch you in the next deep dive.